The first snowflake of December had barely kissed the ground when I began my annual transformation of 1247 Maple Street into what my neighbors had lovingly dubbed Christmas Wonderland. It was a tradition that had started innocently enough 7 years ago when my daughter Emma was just 5 years old, her eyes wide with wonder at the simple string of multicolored lights I'd hung along our modest front porch. But like all good things, it had grown, evolved, and taken on a life of its own. This year, I'd outdone myself. 23,000 LED lights cascaded from every conceivable surface of our 2-story colonial home. The front yard featured a life-size nativity scene, complete with animatronic wise men who bowed every 30 seconds, their robes shimmering with embedded fiber optics. A 12-foot inflatable Santa stood guard beside our mailbox, his mechanical arm waving cheerfully. At passing cars, the centerpiece was my pride and joy, a synchronized light show that danced to Christmas music, broadcast on 88.1 FM, complete with projections of snowflakes that seemed to fall endlessly across our house's facade. The installation had taken me 3 weeks of evenings and weekends, countless trips to Home Depot, and a small fortune in electrical components. My wife Sarah had initially protested the expense, 10-year-old Jake. More importantly, it brought joy to our entire neighborhood. Cars would slow down as they passed, children pressed their faces against windows, and families made our house a destination on their evening walks. At least, most of the neighborhood appreciated it. 18 months ago, and from day one, she'd made it clear that she viewed herself as the unofficial guardian of our streets, property values, and community standards. She was the type of woman who measured her grasp with a ruler to ensure it met HOA specifications, who knew every local ordinance by heart, and who had the city inspector's number saved in her phone under speed dial 1. Came on December 3rd, just 2 days after I'd completed the display and begun the nightly light shows. I was in my garage organizing the extension cords and timers when I heard the sharp rap of knuckles on my front door. Through the window, I could see Karen's silhouette, rigid and imposing even in the soft glow of my Christmas lights. "Good evening, Michael," she said when I opened the door, her voice carrying that particular tone of artificial politeness that people use when they're about to deliver bad news. She was dressed in her typical uniform, a crisp blazer, pressed slacks, and an expression that suggested she'd been personally wronged by the universe. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by, but I wanted to discuss your ... display." I stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind me. The last thing I needed was for Emma and Jake to overhear what was clearly going to be an unpleasant conversation. "What about it, Karen?" "Well, it's quite extensive," she said, gesturing broadly. "At my lights, I've been doing some research, and I believe there may be some city ordinances that apply to this type of installation. Noise ordinances, for instance, that music plays until 10 o'clock every night." I checked my watch. It was 7:30 p.m. The city noise ordinance allows for reasonable noise until 10 p.m. on weeknights and 11 p.m. on weekends. I specifically researched this before setting up the broadcast system. Yes, well, there are also considerations about light pollution, electrical safety, and the impact on traffic flow. Cars have been slowing down, parking inappropriately, and frankly, it's becoming a safety hazard. Have there been any accidents? Any complaints filed with the city? Not yet, but then, I'm not sure what the problem is, Karen. This is private property. The display meets all city codes. Her composure cracked slightly. "The problem, Michael, is that some of us moved to this neighborhood for its quiet, family-friendly atmosphere. We didn't sign up to live across from a commercial theme park that stung, and thousands of dollars into creating something beautiful for my community." And she was comparing it to a cheap tourist trap. "I understand your concerns, but do you?" she interrupted. "Do you understand what this is doing to property values? Do you understand that I have guests who are being disturbed by this chaos?" In the 18 months since Karen had moved in, I'd noticed a steady stream of different cars in her driveway, people with suitcases coming and going at all hours. I'd assumed she had a lot of visitors, maybe family members or friends staying for extended periods. "I'm sorry if the display is causing you inconvenience," I said, trying to keep my voice level, "but it's legal, it's temporary, and it brings joy to a lot of people in the neighborhood." Joy. This is a residential street, not the Las Vegas Strip. Some of us value peace and quiet. Some of us don't want to live next to a circus. Then maybe you should have bought a house in a different neighborhood, I said, immediately regretting the words as soon as they left my mouth. Her eyes flashed with something dangerous. Maybe I should have, but I didn't, and now I have to deal with this ... this spectacle. Well, don't worry, Michael. I'm sure we can find a solution that works for everyone. The way she said solution made my stomach drop. It was the tone of someone who was about to make my life very difficult. 3 days later, I found the citation tucked under my windshield. Wiper, violation of City Ordinance, the 2nd of March 847, excessive holiday display without permit. The fine was $500 with an additional $100 per day until the violation was corrected. Below that, in smaller print, were references to noise ordinances, electrical safety codes, and something called visual pollution standards. I stared at the citation in disbelief. I'd spent hours researching the city codes before installing the display. I'd even called the city planning office to confirm that no permits. The clerk had been very clear. As long as the display didn't extend onto city property and didn't violate noise ordinances, it was perfectly legal. But here was an official citation, complete with the city seal and the signature of Inspector Janet Morrison. The citation required me to either obtain proper permits, which, according to the document, could take 4 to 6 weeks to process, or remove the display entirely within 72 hours. What's that? Karen called the city on us, I said, handing her the paper. She somehow convinced them that our Christmas lights are a code violation. You researched all of this before you started. You called the city yourself. I know, but look at this. I pointed to the bottom of the citation. It says here that a formal complaint was filed by a concerned neighbor, citing disruption to the peaceful enjoyment of their property and potential safety hazards. The inspector was required to investigate and found several violations. What violations? You followed every rule. According to this, I need a special event permit for the music broadcast, a temporary structure permit for the nativity scene, and an electrical safety inspection for the synchronized lighting system, something called the Community Aesthetic Standards Ordinance. Sarah sank into a chair. I've lived in this city for 15 years. I've never heard of half of these ordinances. That's because they're obscure regulations that nobody enforces unless someone specifically complains. Karen knew exactly what buttons to push. The next morning, I took a personal day from work and drove to City Hall. The clerk at the permits desk, a tired-looking woman named Beth, pulled up my file on her computer. Yes, I see the citation here, she said, frowning at her screen. This is ... unusual. We don't typically require permits for residential holiday displays. That's what I thought. I called before I started the installation. Jerry, in planning, right? He's usually very good about knowing the codes. She clicked through several screens. The thing is, Mr. Patterson, these ordinances that are cited, they're real, but they're typically only enforced for commercial displays or special events. Like if someone wanted to set up a carnival in their backyard or something. So why am I being cited? Beth's expression grew uncomfortable. Well, when a formal complaint is filed, we're required to investigate. The inspector found that your display technically falls under several of these ordinances, even though we've never applied them to residential holiday decorations before, Mr. Patterson. I know it seems unfair, but the citation is technically valid. You can appeal it, but that process takes 30 to 45 days, and you'd still need to come into compliance while the appeal is pending. I left City Hall feeling defeated and angry. $500 might not seem like a lot to some people, but with Christmas shopping, the cost of the light display itself, and Jake's upcoming orthodontist bills, it was money we didn't have. More than that, it was the principle of the thing. I'd done everything right, followed every rule, and now I was being punished because one bitter neighbor couldn't stand to see other people happy. The next morning I woke up with the kind of clarity that comes from having a purpose. While Sarah got the kids ready for school, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, a legal pad, and what had become my war room of printed documents. The $500 citation sat prominently in the center, but now it felt less like a punishment and more like motivation. My first call was to my brother-in-law Tom, who worked as a city planner in the neighboring town of Westfield. If anyone could help me understand the labyrinth of municipal regulations, It was Tom. "Mike, you're dealing with what we call selective enforcement," he explained after I'd outlined my situation. "It's when someone weaponizes city codes that exist but are rarely enforced. The thing is, once you open that door, it swings both ways." "What do you mean?" "I mean, if Karen wants to play the strict interpretation of city codes game, then every single code applies to everyone, including her. And from what you're telling me about this rental business, she's violating some pretty serious ordinances." Tom walked me through the specific violations Karen was likely committing. Operating a short-term rental without permits was just the beginning. There were zoning violations, tax evasion issues, safety code violations, and something called transient occupancy regulations that required special licensing. "The city takes this stuff seriously now," Tom explained. "Too many neighborhoods have been destroyed by unregulated Airbnb, noise, parking problems, strangers coming and going at all hours. Most municipalities have cracked down hard. So what's my best approach? Document everything. Get proof of the commercial operation, evidence of the zoning violations, and make sure you have a paper trail. Then file a formal complaint. But Mike, be prepared for this to get ugly. People don't like being exposed, especially when they're making money off breaking the rules." After hanging up with Tom, I spent the next 3 hours creating what I called my Karen file. I printed screenshots of all her rental listings, documented the pricing and availability calendars, and even found cached versions of ads she'd posted on other platforms. The woman was running a sophisticated operation. She had professional photos, detailed house rules, and even a cleaning service that came between guests. But the more I dug, the more violations I found. Karen was advertising amenities that didn't exist in her permits, like a business center and conference space that were clearly just her living room with a folding table. She was also marketing to corporate travelers, which suggested she was targeting business use in a residential zone. The breakthrough came when I found her business registration. Karen Whitmore had filed a DBA doing business as Certificate for Suburban Sanctuary Rentals just 2 months after buying the house. She'd registered it as a hospitality business, which meant she was fully aware that she was operating a commercial enterprise. This wasn't some casual room-sharing arrangement. This was a deliberate business venture in clear violation of our neighborhood's zoning laws. Around noon, I decided to take a walk around the block to clear my head and maybe do some casual surveillance. As I approached Karen's house, I noticed a black sedan in her driveway that I didn't recognize. Through the front window, I could see someone moving around inside, definitely not Karen, who drove a white SUV. I was about to continue my walk when the front door opened and a man in a business suit emerged, wheeling a small suitcase behind him. He loaded it into the sedan, then spent a few minutes on his phone before driving away. 20 minutes later, a Honda Civic pulled into the driveway, and a woman with 2 small children got out and began unloading luggage. I watched from my own front yard, pretending to check my mailbox, as the woman struggled with her bags and tried to manage her kids. She looked confused, checking her phone repeatedly and peering at the house numbers. Finally, she approached my neighbor Bob's house and knocked on the door. "Excuse me," I heard her say when Bob answered. "I'm looking for the Suburban Sanctuary Rental. I have a reservation, but I can't find a key or any check-in instructions." Bob looked confused. "I don't know anything about a rental. That's Karen's house across the street. Maybe you should try there." The woman looked frustrated. "I've been trying to call the host for an hour. My kids are tired, and we drove 4 hours to get here." That's when I made a decision that would change everything. I walked over to help. "Hi there," I said, approaching the woman. "I'm Mike. I live across the street. Are you having trouble with your rental?" "Yes. I booked through Airbnb, and I was supposed to receive check-in instructions this morning, but I haven't heard anything. The host isn't answering her phone, and I don't know what to do." I looked at her kids, a boy about Jake's age and a girl who couldn't have been more than 6. They looked exhausted and confused. "What's the address on your reservation?" She showed me her phone. It was definitely Karen's house. "Look, let me call the host for you. Sometimes local calls go through better." I dialed Karen's number, and she answered on the second ring. "Michael, why are you calling me?" "Karen, there's a family here looking for their rental. They have a reservation for your house, but they can't get in." There was a long pause. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Karen, I'm standing in your driveway with a mother and two small children who drove 4 hours to get here. They have a confirmed Airbnb reservation for your address. They just need check-in instructions. Another pause then. I'm out of town. I'll call them back when soon I have to go. She hung up. I turned to the frustrated mother and her tired children. I'm sorry, she says. She's out of town and will call you back soon. The woman looked like she was about to cry. This is unbelievable. I took time off work, drove all this way, and now we have nowhere to stay. The kids are hungry, and I can't afford to book another hotel last minute. Looking at those kids, I made another decision that Sarah would later call both completely insane and exactly the right thing to do. Listen, I said, I live right across the street. Why don't you and your kids come over for some lunch while we figure this out? I can help you find alternative accommodations if Karen doesn't come through. The woman, her name was Jennifer, I learned, nearly started crying with relief. Are you sure? I don't want to impose. It's no imposition. I have kids too. I know how this feels. An hour later, Jennifer and her kids were sitting at my kitchen table, eating grilled cheese sandwiches while I worked my phone, trying to find them a place to stay. Sarah had come home from work early and was helping entertain the kids, while I dealt with what was rapidly becoming a crisis. Karen finally called Jennifer back at 2 p.m. I was in the room when she took the call, and I could hear Karen's voice, even though the phone wasn't on speaker. I'm sorry for the confusion, Karen said, but I'm going to have to cancel your reservation. There's been a family emergency. Cancel, Jennifer's voice rose. I'm already here. I took time off work, drove 4 hours, and paid for this reservation weeks ago. You can't just cancel. I understand you're frustrated, but this is an emergency situation. I'll make sure you get a full refund. A refund doesn't help me, right? Now, I need a place to stay tonight, and everything else in the area is booked or too expensive. I'm sorry, but there's nothing I can do. I'll process the refund immediately. Karen hung up, leaving Jennifer staring at her phone in disbelief. I can't believe this is happening. That's when I realized I had Karen exactly where I wanted her. She'd just provided me with the perfect witness to her illegal operation, a paying customer who could testify that she was indeed running a commercial rental business. Even better, Karen had just demonstrated the kind of unprofessional behavior that would make any judge sympathetic to my case. Jennifer, I said carefully, I need to ask you something. How long have you been dealing with this host? Have you had problems before? This is my first time booking with her, but I looked at her reviews before I made the reservation. She has dozens of 5-star reviews going back almost a year. People praised her for being responsive and professional. This is completely out of character. Would you be willing to document this experience? Maybe leave an honest review about what happened. Jennifer laughed bitterly. Oh, I'm definitely leaving a review. This is ridiculous. But I had something bigger in mind than just a bad review. Jennifer, I want to be upfront with you about something. The woman who just canceled your reservation, she's been harassing my family about our Christmas lights. She filed a complaint with the city and got us fined, even though our display is completely legal. What I just realized is that her rental business appears to be illegal. She doesn't have the proper permits to operate a short-term rental in this neighborhood. Jennifer's expression sharpened. Are you serious? Dead serious? Would you be willing to help me file a formal complaint? With the city, your testimony would be crucial evidence that she's operating a commercial business without proper permits. Jennifer looked around at my family's home, where her kids were now playing happily with Emma and Jake. She thought about the 4-hour drive, the lost vacation day, the stress of being stranded with 2 small children because someone had decided to cancel a confirmed reservation on a whim. Absolutely, she said. This woman has no right to treat people this way. That evening, after I'd helped Jennifer fee, the dominoes began falling faster than I had anticipated. It started with a knock on my door at 8 a.m. sharp on December 10th, exactly 1 week after Karen had first confronted me about my lights. I opened the door to find Inspector Morrison standing on my porch, but this time she wasn't alone. Behind her stood a man in a dark suit who introduced himself as Detective Ray Castellanos from the city's Business License Investigation Unit. Mr. Patterson, Inspector Morrison began, we wanted to update you on our investigation into Ms. Whitmore's property. We've uncovered some ... significant issues. Detective Castellanos stepped forward, his expression serious. We've been conducting surveillance for the past 3 days. We've documented 17 different vehicles coming and going from Ms. Whitmore's property, with guests staying for periods ranging from 1 night to 5 days. We've also confirmed that she's been advertising on multiple platforms under at least 3 different business names. 3 different names? I asked, genuinely surprised. Suburban Sanctuary Rentals, Maple Street Retreats, and Westfield Corporate Housing, he rattled off. She's been operating what amounts to a small hotel in a residential neighborhood, completely under the radar. The tax implications alone are staggering, we estimate. She's earned over $65,000 in unreported income in the past year. Inspector Morrison looked uncomfortable. Mr. Patterson, I owe you an apology. It appears that Ms. Whitmore has been filing nuisance complaints against several neighbors over the past year, always targeting people with any kind of visible activity that might draw attention to the neighborhood. She complained about the Johnsons' yard sale, the Martinez family's birthday party, and even Mrs. Chen's visiting grandson, who sometimes played basketball in their driveway. She was trying to keep the neighborhood quiet to protect her business, I realized. Exactly. And she was using the city's code enforcement system to do it. When she filed the complaint about your lights, she specifically mentioned that they were causing increased traffic and strangers in the neighborhood, which is ironic, considering her property has been generating more stranger traffic than anything else on the street. Detective Castellanos pulled out a tablet and showed me a series of photos. We've also discovered some disturbing safety violations. Ms. Whitmore has been renting out her basement as a separate unit, advertising it as a cozy garden-level apartment. The basement has no proper egress windows, no separate entrance, and shares the electrical panel with the main house. If there was ever a fire, anyone staying down there would be trapped. I felt a chill run down my spine. She's been putting people's lives at risk. Potentially, yes. We've also found evidence that she's been hosting parties and events without proper permits. One of her listings advertises the property as perfect for small corporate retreats and family celebrations. We found receipts for party supplies and catering equipment. Rentals. As they spoke, I noticed a small crowd gathering across the street. Karen's white SUV was in the driveway, and there appeared to be some kind of commotion happening at her front door. Through the window, I could see Karen gesticulating wildly. While talking to someone, I couldn't see. Is that related to your investigation? I asked, nodding toward her house. Inspector Morrison and Detective Castellanos exchanged glances. We served her with a cease and desist order this morning, Morrison explained. She's been ordered to stop all rental activities immediately and appear before the City Council next week for a hearing on the violations. She's also facing potential criminal charges, Castellanos added: tax evasion, operating an illegal business, and reckless endangerment. The basement rental situation alone could result in serious penalties. As if on cue, Karen's front door burst open and she came storming across the street toward us. She was still in her bathrobe, her hair disheveled, and she looked absolutely furious. You, she shouted, pointing at me. You did this, you vindictive, petty little man. Inspector Morrison stepped between us. Ma'am, you need to calm down. We're conducting official business here. Official business. Karen's voice rose to a shriek. This is harassment. This is retaliation because I complained about his ridiculous light display. Ms. Whitmore, Detective Castellanos said calmly, our investigation began based on evidence of multiple city code violations. The complaint Mr. Patterson filed was thoroughly documented and entirely legitimate. Legitimate? Karen laughed bitterly. He's been spying on me, taking pictures of my property. This is stalking, actually, I said, speaking for the first time. Since Karen had arrived, I documented your illegal business using publicly available information. Your rental listings, your business registration, your advertising, it's all public record. I didn't spy on anything. I just paid attention. Karen's face went red. You think you're so smart, don't you? Well, let me tell you something. I'm going to sue you for harassment, for invasion of privacy, for ma'am. Inspector Morrison interrupted. I need to remind you that making threats in front of city officials is not advisable. You have legal remedies available if you believe Mr. Patterson has acted inappropriately, but threatening him in front of law enforcement is not one of them. Karen seemed to realize how she must look screaming at Her neighbor, while wearing a bathrobe in front of city officials who were investigating her for multiple violations. She took a deep breath and tried to compose herself. "This is all a misunderstanding," she said, her voice artificially calm. "I've been helping friends and family by letting them stay at my house. There's nothing commercial about it." Detective Castellanos pulled out his tablet again. "Ms. Whitmore, we have screenshots of your listings on 7 different rental platforms. We have copies of your business registration. We have records of credit card transactions from guests. We have witness statements from paying customers. One of your recent guests even left a review complaining about your unprofessional cancellation policy." Karen's composure cracked again. "That woman was lying. She was trying to scam me, Jennifer Martinez." I asked. "The mother with 2 small children who drove 4 hours to get here because she had a confirmed reservation at your illegal hotel. She was wait. How do you know her name?" "Because I helped her when you abandoned her in your driveway. I fed her kids lunch while she tried to figure out where she was going to stay after you canceled her reservation without warning." Karen stared at me, and I could see the moment she realized how thoroughly she'd been outmaneuvered. Every move she'd made had been documented. Every violation had been recorded. Every victim had been turned into a witness. "You planned this," she whispered. "You orchestrated this whole thing." "No, Karen, you orchestrated this. You filed a frivolous complaint against my family because our Christmas lights were interfering with your illegal business. You used the city's bureaucracy as a weapon against law-abiding citizens, while you were breaking multiple laws yourself. I just made sure the right people knew about it." Inspector Morrison cleared her throat. "Ms. Whitmore, you need to return to your property. We'll be conducting a full safety inspection this afternoon, and you'll need to be present. I also need to remind you that any guests currently staying at your property will need to find alternative accommodations immediately." Karen looked like she wanted to say more, but Detective Castellanos stepped forward. "Ma'am, I strongly advise you to consult with an attorney before making any further statements. This investigation is ongoing, and anything you say can be used in potential criminal proceedings." The words "criminal proceedings" seemed to hit Karen like a physical blow. She stumbled backward, her face going pale. "This isn't over," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You're right," I replied. "It's not over. It's just beginning. You have to face the city council, the tax authorities, and potentially criminal charges. You have to answer to all the neighbors you've been harassing. You have to explain to your guests why their reservations are being canceled. And you have to do it all while everyone in the neighborhood knows exactly what you've been doing." Karen turned and walked back toward her house, her shoulders sagging with defeat. As she reached her front door, I called out to her, "Karen." She turned around, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Next time you want to complain about someone's Christmas lights, maybe make sure you're not running an illegal hotel first." The next few days brought a parade of developments that surpassed even my most optimistic expectations. The city council scheduled an emergency hearing for Karen's case, which was unusual for code violations, but apparently necessary given the scope of her illegal operation. The local newspaper picked up the story, running an article titled "Suburban Hotel Operator Faces Multiple Violations," that included a photo of Karen's house and a detailed breakdown of her various infractions. But the most satisfying development came when I received a call from Inspector Morrison 3 days after Karen's meltdown in my front yard. "Mr. Patterson, I wanted to let you know that we've completed our investigation into your Christmas light display," she said. "After reviewing all the relevant ordinances and consulting with city attorneys, we're dismissing your citation entirely." Dismissing it? The complaint against you was filed in bad faith by someone who was herself in violation of multiple city codes. More importantly, our legal team has determined